So yeah, what do you have to say about Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, the original?
Well, I'm not going to pretend that I don't love this game and that I'm not super biased towards it. I have my tattoo right here from the game logo, so you know, uh, it might be somewhat rose-tinted glasses I look at this game with, just a little bit. Um, Now, I was curious to ask you, do you have any familiarity with Metal Gear as a franchise, really?
The only game I've ever played and finished of Metal Gear. Well, actually, no. The only one I finished is Guns of the Patriot. That's the one I finished,
Okay,
and
that
then I
might have been. I wonder if that was a little confusing at the time.
and I've played Phantom Pain.
That one's super long. But Metal Gear Solid 3, personally, this is my favorite in the franchise. It was what, November 2004 this came out. This was such a breath of fresh air for this franchise. To quote David Hayter, the iconic voice behind Snake, this franchise, even going back to like the Metal Gear 1 and 2, right, which were like 8-bit games on like the MSX and the Nintendo, those games and one in Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, they have this very like, they're sci-fi, they're futuristic technology, very science fiction settings, and this still has sci-fi elements too, but it is the only game in the franchise to have this kind of retro 60s. It's doing a little bit of a James Bond thing. I mean, there's even, this very iconic Snake Eater theme song near the beginning of the game it very much evokes like a kind of an old school James Bond movie. Um, but story wise, if you're not familiar with this franchise, you might see the character here and think, that's Solid Snake. It's not though. If you've played any of the games, you might know that there is a cloning program called the Terrible Children or the Les Enfants Terribly, as they say in the games. And the villain from the original two 8-bit Metal Gear games, Big Boss, who you kill right at the end of those, and like the games afterwards are dealing with like the fallout of taking out this like horrible like war criminal. He's the man that all of this cloning was done from, and that's such an element of this franchise is all these clones and the various games. And this is the original soldier, the original guy going back into the 1960s. Now, some people have said this game's political. I'm going to give you a little blurb of the story. You tell me if you think it's not political at all. But this is taking place at like the height of the Cold War, right? And let me just make sure I have the name for this right because I don't want to pronounce it wrong. Um, but the Brezhnev is this like extremist terrorist cell inside Russia, wants to overthrow the Soviet Union, and you, Snake, your mentor, the boss, defects to this terrorist cell, brings a tactical nuke with her, hands it right over to Colonel Volgan, the leader of this group. They launch it, kind of making it look like the US launched a nuke onto the Soviet Union, inciting this international incident, right, causing all sorts of chaos. And the US government, the CIA specifically, right, off the books, is like, all right, we got to send you back in here because your mentor breaks your arm, tosses you off a bridge when they set the nuke off. But you have to go back in a second time, and you're the only person that can go in, get the evidence, making it sure to the UN that this was not the United States that launched this. This was this terrorist organization, and this is all kind of a ploy. And then also to kill both the leader of this organization, Colonel Volgan, and your former mentor, the boss, along with the Cobra unit, which is kind of like her. Those are like the big boss fights throughout the game. Does that sound political at all? It's just kind of totally apolitical. Just nothing political about that.
Maybe a teensy bit political there, I would say.
Just a tiny bit. Just the themes of nuclear war and stuff like that. But no, I love this game. I've been a fan of it for a really long time. I I think that it's you know you talk about Hideo Kojima games, and some people would say they're a bit pretentious. But I think the first three Metal Gear games are the ones that kind of won everybody over. Some of his later stuff people said that about, but I think this is that sweet spot that felt like it had that auteur sensibility and creative direction, but also it had a bit more mass market appeal at the same time. This is kind of maybe the most well-rounded of his games in that sense. The ratio of cutscenes to gameplay is just a bit stronger versus like four. People complain about for having too many cutscenes, taking control away from the player, and then complain, in the opposite direction about five, where it's like this is all gameplay, and it's like there's very little cutscene, very little story compared to the other games. This one is like almost kind of the perfect sweet spot. Um, but yeah, you go into the jungles of Russia, and you have to, make your way through these encampments in the jungle, and there's so many great elements. Hideo Kojima kind of invented the like stealth genre with the original 8-bit games, and he just every one of these
Hold on just a
evolves
second.
them. Oh, sorry.
Ulysses is saying that it sounds kind of high pitched there.
Oh,
I don't know if that's on my end or if that's on.
let me
It's
see.
like
I've
I
got
don't
my laptop played up, so I'll try and play
really
the
know.
audio here just for you.
Um,
It doesn't sound like that on my computer here, so I'm wondering if it maybe is maybe Ulysses. It maybe might be your audio.
yeah, okay. I'm not hearing that on my end.
Yeah, yeah.
Really, it says on both of us. Uh,
I'm thinking it must be his system then, because I'm playing it on my laptop here, and I'm not hearing that at all.
try Ulysses. Try refreshing, and then see if that fixes it. If you refresh there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Let's see here. Because yeah, I'm
I'll refresh my browser here and just to make absolutely sure.
yeah. Maybe I'll refresh mine too. Yeah. It says that's the only thing that sounds off on the computer. Huh? You say try refreshing before you say anything. That's very strange. I don't know if Rampage is in here. Rampage, if you're still in here, maybe I don't know if you hear the same thing. There's that. Uh, that's strange.
Yeah.
Let me check my audio here. Um, do. Hold on. Make sure there's no feedback here. I'm gonna cut my camera off for a second.
No worries.
Hold on.
Let's see.
Make sure there's no feedback here. No worries.
Yeah, I refreshed on my end, and it still sounds fine on my computer.
Uh, yeah, I don't. I mean, yeah, I guess we can keep going there. I mean, I don't hear anything, but I guess we'll see when it's finished there. But thank you, Ulysses. Hopefully it's nothing wrong with the audio there. Hopefully not.
Yeah,
Uh,
I refreshed it and everything, and it still sounds okay on my computer playing it here. So yeah, yeah, sounds good
okay,
on that.
okay.
Um,
But yeah, I guess you can continue there.
yeah. So back to 1964, going through the jungles in Russia or in the Soviet Union, I guess. But the game here it's such interesting gameplay because it's a little different than any of the others in the franchise. It's the only one that has this mechanic called the survival beaver. You go into the menu And you can do this after any combat encounter. Although if you're playing the game at like an expert level, right, you're gonna avoid any combat encounter that's not a boss fight. But you do physically, I mean, yeah, it's a menu. It's not like you're doing a mini game where you actually got to jab the knife in your arm or anything like that. But you do have to dig individual bullets out of your body, put stints in, disinfect wounds. You have to feed yourself by like finding and hunting animals kind of on the fly. There's a lot of like survival mechanics here. That and this is the only game in the franchise that has that. So that's something that's very unique to this particular entry. And the character, so like Solid Snake, right, is your kind of main franchise character. Big boss here, as in this prequel game, is referred to as Naked Snake because he's being sent in with literally no equipment at all. Like you have nothing when you get you know dropped in. And even at the beginning of the game, they say it's like the world's first Halo jump. I think that this character is meant to be doing. Yep, that's the survival viewer right there. So you have to, and yeah, so the remake is going to be doing some interesting stuff where we're maybe expanding and kind of doing more with that mechanic, which I'm really excited for because again, it's just nothing, no other game in this franchise, and definitely no other game that I've played outside of like a survival sim, which not totally my thing, has elements like this though. Um, but yeah, you man, there's so much here. There's so many little things. There's so many hidden weapons. There's like you can like if you go into certain places and you take out like a certain thing, you can get like animal masks. You can get like an alligator mask that lets you like you can crouch in water and you can basically like disguise yourself as like an alligator moving across the water to hide from enemy sight. You also have the camo index too, so like you have so many different kind of patterns that you apply to your character to blend in different parts of the environment. It's and then four, the one that you played has the like octo camo where it automatically adjusts to whatever you're touching, kind of thing. But so that kind of got its start here in this game with this kind of the evolution of how they did that. Um, but yeah, I mean, like you really aren't going to find better stealth gameplay outside of maybe like the Hitman franchise, in my opinion. It's so measured and calculated. I remember sitting here, and I played the game again recently to be able to talk about it, but you can just sit there and perfectly learn the patrol routes of these enemies, and like it can be difficult. Like they don't necessarily if you're as long as you're not playing on like just the kind of basic normal difficulty, which I've played it enough times. I feel like I always have to bump it up a little bit. But if you're playing on a hard mode or above that, it's not an easy game to make it through without getting caught. And I'll kind of pivot into talking about like the boss fights a little bit here. But one of the big mechanics in these games, and Kojima always and his team, they always like to do some interesting kind of experimental stuff like this. But there's one boss fight in particular where you have to kind of trudge up this river. And it's literally against like a ghost, right? You can't actually fight it, you just have to follow it up this river. But if you've played the game without killing enemies, which it very much encourages you to do, you're just walking up a river. Every once in a while, the body of one of the bosses will float by. But if you've been playing the game super recklessly, killing all sorts of enemies as you're going along, the river you'll actually have to it'll be difficult. You'll be like trudging up through like a river of bodies flowing down towards you, and it'll
It's not
be
this
like
boss fight, is it? The pain?
that's not this boss fight. So the pain is like a dude made out of bees that shapeshifts a gun made of bees that shoots bees at you. Fun boss fight. It's Metal Gear Solid is like totally kind of an anime. It has this like anime sensibility and ridiculousness to it. It can be very serious and very heavy and very political, very geopolitical in what it's doing and kind of the story that we're following. But then it also has a shape-shifting bee commando and a ghost and like a spider guy. Like there's all these kind of weird over the top anime sci-fi supernatural things going on here, which in these parts even stand out more because this game has kind of a more toned down retro element as far as like the technology goes. So like this guy made of bees, like he really stands out in this game, especially for that reason. But no, there's just all these fun small things that they do in these games. There's so many little hidden elements that you can find and discover. I mean, even going back to like the first game, just to reference that, the game doesn't tell you that if you equip cigarettes, the smoke will reveal the lasers in the doorway for you. You just kind of have to figure that out on your own. And this series has always had a lot of these things where you're really rewarded for experimenting and for exploring and for searching and for trying to get as much of it as you can. I mean, one element that um, signifies that especially well is the codec call. And that's something that's been in every one of these games, but you get a lot of calls over your this codec that you have, right? So you've got a whole team of people with you. Major Zero is kind of the leader of your troop. Paramedic, your medic. Sigint, who is like your weapons expert, who would go on to be, retroactively is a major character in the first game as well. But just taking the time to call each of these characters, fairly frequently throughout the game. The game doesn't say very often, "Hey, you need to go communicate with this person." There's a couple points where it does, but most of that is optional. But the story is made so much more rich by calling these NPCs as often as you can and getting all these stories out of them. I mean, these characters will have personal conversations. Like if you call the paramedic character between like each area, she will get into a conversation about like famous Hollywood movies, stuff like Godzilla or King Kong or kind of these old school feature films. Them, yeah, there's a conversation that Snake has about the movie Them with this character even. With the giant ants from back in the day, and so there's so much personality here that you could easily kind of push through this game super fast and miss. So anybody, if you haven't played this and this, you hear us talking about it and it makes you think about playing this game, really take your time. Really try and get the most out of that mechanic because I think it's something you could easily miss if you're not really paying attention to it. Um, but yeah, and then as far as like the story goes, this is I think Hideo Kojima's right. And again, not only him, there's a whole team behind him, but you can feel his thumbprint on it. And it is, I think, at the peak of his creativity and that whole team's creativity. You have something that is geopolitically heavy, manages to pull back and have some humor when it needs to, for sure, but also evokes kind of the best of the James kind of classic James Bond as well. You really get a lot of that. And it's also telling the story of like a tragic villain. Because before this game, the Naked Snake or Big Boss, right, as he's known throughout the rest of the franchise, this character was like purely seen as this like totally just horrible, war criminal monster, right? And you get to see, uh, and again, I'll quote David Hayter on this, but you know, Solid Snake in like the very first game is like kind of broken and hardened and kind of I'm already sick of this. I'm already beaten down. I'm already super cynical. But you start this game with Big Boss still kind of not like still kind of having hope and still kind of believing in things and believing like that a country will treat its soldiers right if you do right by your country, if you do right by your military, and you just kind of watch that ideal. I'd say that's maybe the core, maybe most important theme throughout the story in this game is watching this character slowly have that idea just beaten out of him. And let me ask your opinion on this. Should we do full spoilers? I know it's an old game, but with the remake coming out, I feel like maybe people, will be playing it for the first time. So what do you think?
I mean, do you think they'll maybe have any major changes, you think? You feel like they
I
will?
think well, they've said they're reusing all of the voice acting even from the original. So like even the recordings are the same dialogue. It's really just the controls, gameplay, visuals that are being upgraded. So the
Okay.
story will be the same story going into the new one.
Okay. I'd say go ahead. I mean, it's 20 years old, I'd say let loose there.
Well, here's your spoiler warning if you haven't played it and you want to save yourself for the remake. But the big thing with this game, the big twist, I suppose, is the boss, right? Defects to this terrorist organization at the beginning of the game, betrays you, breaks your arm, tosses you off a bridge, and throughout the game, like you keep getting into fights with this character here and there, and it seems like she's trying to mentor you even while being, kind of the second main, maybe even the primary antagonist of the story. But as you wind down near the end, you get to the last fight, and what's kind of revealed to you is that she is still actually working for the U.S. government here. This is it's she's like a triple agent here. It's all this kind of long con to I'm going to try and keep this as simple as I can because Metal Gear does get convoluted. But it's Metal Gear Solid 2 introduces this like AI system called the Patriots, which is what you're fighting in for. A series of AI that are basically have taken over the world and are manipulating the information age to create this kind of contextless AI driven super future society. And in Metal Gear Solid 3, the boss is a triple agent basically trying to uh, trying to get the obtain and return to the U.S. government the resources of the philosophers, which are the human beings that the AI in 2 and 4 are modeled after. So this secret society of AI in the other games, their predecessors were these like rich kind of Illuminati type figure, right? Super hyper elite rich people across the world all had their money divided and pooled into this thing, and she basically has to brand herself as this enemy of the country, and you have to murder her, like, and even after you beat the boss fight in a cutscene, it plays this very sad moment of him having to point the gun in her face, but the game does still make you press a button to pull the trigger. And it she basically, her story all ends up being about dying as this hero with just absolute dedication to a nation, completely tossing aside like individual personhood for this country or for these ideals, and watching that happen and seeing Snake at this point, but Big Boss, and as far as his longer character goes, just kind of be broken and betrayed by, like, one of the only people, he's had a rough life in general, this person that has been like kind of a mother to him, almost very much a mentor, having to murder this person because your country demanded it of both of you, and connecting that and seeing where he in the rest of the franchise, right, be this just villain who just hates like the concept of nations. And it is, I mean, it's not too dissimilar to like the pirates in Nassau, right, trying to form their own country. And that's what you're infiltrating in the original like 8-bit Metal Gear games. But yes, it's just this really incredible character arc for both your protagonist and your antagonist. Some of the most, I think, emotionally affecting story beats in video games. I mean, you talk about the whole video games as art argument, and nowadays I think a lot more people accept that idea. But back when this was coming out, I'd say like, this franchise, this game especially, stuff like Shadow of the Colossus, you had a few, but Silent Hill 2 is another big one. But this was a huge mover in terms of pushing people to think, hey, video games can tell really smart, complex, and emotionally rich narratives.
Mm. And this game, came out in '04, has been updated to a lot of platforms there, PlayStation 3, Nintendo Switch, the PlayStation 4. There was a remastered collection that came out with basically all the older Metal Gear games that people can get right now. I think that's
It has
available for
5 games on that collection. So it's the one Metal Gear 1 and 2, the PSX games, and then Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, 3. So five titles on there. It's quite a bit of game.
yeah, for I think about $40, I think you can get it for, there.
Yeah, I think when it first launched, it was 60, but I think the price has come down since then.
Yeah. If you want just the individual game, you can get it for, I think, about $14 if you just want on a digital store. I think you can get it for like
Yeah, I
13.
believe that's right.
There you can get that. Do you suggest people do get the mastered kind of collection there? Do you suggest people do that?
I would now. When it first launched, it had some issues. There were some things about it that just were not working great on launch, and it's a little embarrassing because it's like, guys, these games are 20 years old now with this one we're talking about right now, especially. But I think they kind of saw that. They've been working on it. They've been updating them. They've been fixing the problems. And so I think now you pick it up. I think when I picked it up, I got it for like $30 because it was on sale. I think with the patching that they've done and for the price, it's 5 games. It's five of the like most classic video games that are out there. I think it's worth it now for sure. I think the only thing that's really significantly different is that some of the so they used a lot of like stock footage, like actual stock footage of real footage of wars and stuff from the 1950s and 60s, and I think some of that has been removed from this most recent re-release just because of licensing issues. But I think that's the only really significant difference in the game.
Yeah. So here you can get Metal Gear the NES version, Snake's Revenge, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake there. Let me show the screen there, the games you can get. Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation, Metal Gear Solid VR Missions, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, and Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater there. So that's all the games
Okay.
you can get in the value one of the master collection here. Um, you also said, didn't certain people say that the one lady is not hot enough in the remaster there? Uh,
That I believe is referencing. People said that about the character model for the boss in the remakes trailer footage, which I think is just insane because I think it looks like the same character but with better graphics. I don't think people complained about the remaster, but I think the remake is what they were talking about. Which
yeah.
again, I still don't think is. I think it's totally unfounded, but yeah, people are going off about it.
So this is the remake right here, which is coming out sometime in 2025, and this is how Big Boss looks in this right here. Um,
Yeah.
so this is
She
her. So
looks the boss looks the same as she did in the original, but with better graphics. It's it totally looks like. Plus, I mean, like it's not a character that was hypersexualized in the original to begin with. She's kind of she's a mentor. She's got a bit more of a maternal kind of nature as far as the relationship to the character you're playing as goes. She does. There's that you saw it when she was dying, and she does zip her suit down in that boss fight at the end. But it doesn't feel sexualized when they do it. It's very much a I'm going to show you what serving my country has done to me. And she has this scar that goes like all the way down her entire chest. And it's like it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel sexual at all. So I don't know why people are like this character's not sexy enough in in the remake, but especially when Ava, who you see on the screen there as well, that's a character in the game, and she's plenty sexual. So
right. So what does
if you really need it, focus on her.
I meant to bring up this case. So what does Ava do in the story? That you mentioned Snake, you mentioned Boss there. What does Ava do here?
So she goes kind of hand in hand with another character. There's then they go there's two characters that are like triple kind of other also triple agents within the story. You have Ava and Revolver Ocelot, who are two spies that have like infiltrated the or the Soviet Union kind of terrorist cell that Colonel Volgan is running, and she very much plays the part of the Catwoman, the Black Cat, the Bond, the seductress Bond girl that's going to betray Snake right at the end. She is the reason that the AI kind of exists in 2 and 4 because she she kind of is that constantly playing all sides thing, and then at the end of the game she drugs you and takes that philosopher's right that treasure that I was talking about and whisks it off. And like she's a big part of the reason that the AI is even a problem in the later games or in the chronologically later games. She makes an appearance, a much older version of her character in 4, which you might not have recognized that that was who that was at the time you played it, but she does make an appearance in the 4th game as well.
Okay. That's a way older version there.
much older. Yeah, I think they call her Big Mama when she shows up in that.
Well, let me see if I can find a picture from her from that
And I think
game.
she's still got her shirt down even then. So
Okay. Because how old is she in four there?
in four, I'm not sure about the exact age, but she's got to at least be in her 50s, if not 60s.
Okay, she's still looking pretty good. She's still looking all right.
Yeah, yeah, not bad at all. And you know
Okay.
what? You don't see older women wearing that low cut of tops too often. So good for her. She
Yeah.
must feel good about herself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Metal Gear
No,
Solid. So this.
she's. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say for the character. I mean, like I could see looking at it and going like, wow, that's over sexualized. But at the same time, I think it does serve the Bond girl like seductress kind of thing fairly well. It certainly is distracting to the other characters in the game, and she does get one over on him because of it. So
Mm,
I don't know. It's I think it fits fairly well with the role she plays, but I mean, it's don't get me wrong, it's laughable sometimes when she walks out on screen, and I'm like, all right, that's just kind of your fashion choice, huh?
okay. With Metal Gear Solid, so it's considered one of the greatest video games of all time. Metal Gear Solid 3 was met with critical acclaim and commercial success of having sold more than 4 million copies worldwide as of March 2010. The game received praise due to its story, protagonist, cutscenes, and new features. Though the camel system, had a more mixed response. Criticism befell on the game's camera and frame rate. Um, which, the new remake aims to go like, you can go back to the old camera system if you want to, but we have a new updated modern camera system there for people. There you can also have some features that do remind you of the old game. I showed some footage of you can adjust the color there to, have that,
Yeah.
color saturation there of that. Yeah, I mean, so this getting a remake, officially there, we talked about a little bit before when we did a trailer reaction. I mean, what do you think? I mean, does it need a remake?
I think the controls can be a little clunky at times, let's say some coming from someone that has nostalgia, right? Go to go in and play this again. I played these long enough ago that the controls were just what they were at the time. Going back to it, it could be it took me a minute to get back into the groove of it. Once I got it though. I think it's not like totally archaic. It's not like the old Resident Evil games for me where I'm just like I can't even with those tank controls. But I do think if you are a newcomer to the franchise, or maybe you've only played four or five, right? I think it could be a little weird to wrap your head around because it's just such a different control scheme. Um, it's not as fluid. It doesn't allow you to right control the camera. It's this like fixed kind of more out there camera angles. Um, the way that you like fire the gun, you don't really use like the triggers. It's like squares, like the fire button, and like you like hit a button to like go into a first person mode and then fire from that a lot of the time. Otherwise, if you fire from the hip, like it's a fixed camera, and so you're not like aiming exactly like you would be used to in a typical shooter. Um, but I think it's really good that they're going to have the old school control scheme to choose from. So you're going to get both in the remake, which makes it to me it seems like that's the best of both worlds. If you like the original and you just don't want it to change the way it plays, great. They have that. Personally, I'm going to play it in the new style when the remake comes out. I think I can't wait to see what it's like with that updated control scheme, proper third person, old over the shoulder camera angles. The movement will probably be a lot more fluid as far as like the rolling and the diving and the crawling and just being able to kind of swap between stances a little more fluidly. Um, yeah, I mean, I think visually, I think it can use the update. I do. I think it's a great story. I think the voice acting and the writing holds up very, very well. And I think, the sign that that's the case is that they're not redoing the voice acting or the writing. They're only redoing the visuals and the controls. And maybe they'll add some to the levels themselves so that there's a little more exploring you can do. But they're reusing all of the old audio files from the original game. The only new audio that they're recording is around the tutorial. Because the tutorial in the original is going to tell you to use buttons and explain things in a way that does not make sense on like a PS5 controller. So the only new audio recording is going to be for the tutorial section at the beginning of the game. And I think one or two of these voice actors may have passed away at this point too. So, Metal Gear is one of those examples of one of the earliest examples of like really good voice acting in a video game. So I think it's a good thing that they're not changing that. I think that's something you don't really want to mess with. It's really high quality voice acting. David Hayter, I mean, icon, man, absolute icon. And he's worked as a screenwriter too. He worked on the script for the first X-Men movie, funnily enough.
Yeah, fun fact.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I can't recommend this game enough. I think the original holds up very well. Clunky in some places, mostly in the way it looks. And so I think of the remake is it's 20 years later, 21 years later when it comes out. I think it's been enough time. I think it's worth it.
So, what would be your review? Would be, I mean, sorry, your rating for Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater?
Well, I say it with some nostalgia blinders on, but I give it a This Is Cinema. For the things that have aged about it, I've got the nostalgia going back a little, so it may not be quite on that level to somebody that plays it for the first time today. But this did a lot of firsts for games, a lot of things that it's still the only franchise or game to do. Some of that survival viewer stuff I was talking about. And I think it's just really high quality, deep storytelling. It's some of the oldest stuff in video games that really sold games as telling a complex, emotionally rich story. I think that where it counts, this game holds up really, really well. Um, yeah, this is cinema. I think if you're not familiar with the gate controls and the gameplay of the old games, playing it for the first time now, I'd probably still give it a peek, even for under that consideration. But with the remake coming out, it might be worth waiting for it. I do think it might be worth waiting for it. But hey, you know what? I don't think you can go wrong with the classic version or the remake as of right now.
Yeah. So, you say you advise people not to pick up the original, just wait for the remake. That'd probably be better for people if they want to get into the game.
If you're it really I think depends on the person. If you're someone that is just in general plays games from any era and you are okay with playing stuff that's older, I think totally pick up the original. It's still worth it. If you're someone who is maybe newer to gaming, maybe you're a little on the younger side, you haven't been playing games as long, so like when you try and play something old, you're just like, oh God, what is this? It looks just doesn't look right or play right to me. Then yes, 100% wait for the remake. It'll be a much smoother experience. But I think there's value in both, and I'll probably return to both versions once the remake is out. I can see myself still returning to the original in the future.
All right. So, you give it a this is cinema there for?
I would. I mean, like I said, I tattooed it right on my body there, so I don't have that many tattoos either. So that's a big one.
All right. So, Sage, give it a Metal Gear Solid 3 a this is cinema, highest rating there. Yeah. So, very, very nice.
It would definitely go in my all-time top 10. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, it's considered, I guess, a lot of highly regarded by a lot of critics there as being one of the greatest video games there. Yeah.